Great. Thank you. Thank you, Felix, for the excellent presentation. So just last part from our side, probably the most interesting of all. Very exciting panel. We're going to talk about navigating international growth and how potentially AI could help do that. And for that, I'm actually going to be joined by I think one of the best panels I've been ever involved. First of all, Felix, which you all know, so he's back to help us back. We also have Jana. Jana is a CFO on demand at Somea Partners. So Jana, thank you for joining us. And then finally as well, Alina. Alina is also an interim CFO and partner at torq.partners. So thank you, Alina, as well for joining us. Great. For our panel today, we're going to try to keep it very practical and very tangible. We have three speakers that have gone through international expansions and understand technology very well. So we're going to try to give you tips, practical tips and tangible tips of how to navigate international growth and how technology can help you do that. Two main points. First point is, as CFOs or finance teams, what is our role in an international expansion? What are companies expecting from us and how can we support? And secondly, once we understand that, the second thing is how technology can help us achieve that role faster or easier. So Alina, I'm going to start with you. You obviously have a lot of experience with multi-international businesses, very complex businesses operating in many jurisdictions. Once you have everything set up and once kind of your sales team is pushing you to do more and more business, how does finance kind of keep priority steady, and what is kind of your playbook of things that have to be in order of priority to make sure we can take control of all of those international operations?
Yeah, maybe I can talk a little bit about a private equity buy and build case that I worked at as a CFO in my past. And I think as a private equity buy and build kind of case, you have many different countries. We had 5 different entities in 5 different countries, and nothing was really aligned. So the first thing that you would want to look at is definitely the tooling side, because that is a question: how much transparency can you actually get? And we were thinking about, or we actually did implement NetSuite as an ERP system. Because the strategy of the leadership team was we want as much transparency and as much redundancy also on the people side in order to be able to do the bookkeeping. And the second part was liquidity. We had a special case that in the end, one of the countries had an invoicing procedure where all the invoices were sent at the beginning of the year. And then basically by the end of the year, the cash was actually very limited, and we had to make sure that there was enough cash for the company to survive. So liquidity was a major focus, and I think we had it in the beginning. I think you said it, Carlos, when you're collecting kind of the cash balances by the end of each month. So we did that at the beginning in an Excel sheet, and that was really not the way to go, because we had 40 bank accounts across the whole company, and that was way too much. For 5 local entities, you don't need 40 bank accounts. So first we closed them all down, and then we implemented, a liquidity forecasting tool in order to align all of that. And I think the third part is then definitely also kind of reporting and governance, bringing people together on a monthly basis, make sure that the CEO and the CFO of the local entities actually also know what they're talking about. And we did that kind of with, having a standardized KPI set, a standardized reporting template. And also you could really tell how well the CEOs and the CFOs actually have their finances and the performance under control. So that was a good steering mechanism that we had.
Great. Amazing. Jana, I'm going to move over to you. So we've heard from Alina how sort of in the whole functions, how she prioritizes or the different tools or priorities in that sort of set up organization. Before we go that, or we go a couple of sort of months before everything is set up and priorities are there, when your team comes, your sales team, your leadership team comes to you and tells you, we're actually going to do this, we're open a new country, we're going to do this. I guess at the beginning it must be kind of uncertain and must be hard. So help us in your experience as a seasoned CFO, what checks or what processes do you follow to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks while that sort of expansion is taking place?
Well, I think I don't know, is that working? Yeah, I think it is. I think we have to also consider when does it happen in a phase, usually when there's not a big team involved yet in finance. So expansion in startup and scale-up path usually happens, I don't know, firstly after Series A predominantly. And this is already the first, or like almost the first time where a senior, I don't know, position in finance is even filled. Before that, finance was always about getting the books closed before actually looking ahead into the future, because there's so many other priorities within the company and finance is totally underfunded until then. And then you get the first, let's say, very professional investors on board after Series A, and expansion is then on the plate. So you move quickly from, okay, I have to deal with compliance and get everything at least through the months and through the year, towards really thinking ahead and trying to build a team that's ready for international expansion. And that flip usually happens within a couple of months and happens very quickly. So you then have to really, really focus on the very most important things. And what Alina already said is very true, looking at like paving the way in terms of tools where data can flow smoothly through the company, even if it's data from other countries. And then also being, and this is like a moment that usually finance heads miss in that sense, being very early on at the table when decisions are being made, when contracts are being drafted, when you think of, okay, do I need a new entity just because I want to hire somebody from Spain? Or can I do it in a different way? Oh, the first revenue. When is the first revenue coming from a different country? So that usually is a thing that pops up in the monthly report, obviously, but then it's sometimes too late to get a grip on the contract, get a grip on an employer contract, or get a grip on, oh, do we have now a legal entity already? We haven't even noticed in a different country, so we're taxable there, or we have to prepare for other things. So I think being very early on, from day one, if you're a senior hire in a finance position, consistently talk with sales and consistently talk with CEOs to be at the forefront and thinking ahead of what needs to be prepared, and not backwards looking, cleaning everything up. So one worst case probably was when I accompanied a CFO who, I don't know, was very busy in operational finance, but we entered the company, and I found like 8 different entities across Europe and also in the US. I was like, what are you doing there? Do you do sales there? No, we only have employees there. And then it was a total mess up in building a reporting and compliance system around these 8 different entities, which weren't even necessary, to be frank. Some were, some won't. And it was such a big complex system that got like so many resources from a finance team. And that could have been like thought through much more diligently in the first place. And those are some examples that I would name.
So important as a finance leader to try to be early in the conversations.
Yeah.
If they invite you, go. If they don't invite you, just try at least to be early in the conversation to make sure that.
Yes.
Great. I think it's very interesting because we have Alina's and Jana's point from more the centralized finance team. Now we're moving to Felix, who's lived in kind of his own blood, how is to build from the operator side a new sort of expansion or a new international expansion. Obviously, you've had to manage as leader. You don't only have to manage kind of the sales, everything, but you have to basically do everything at the beginning and help a lot, or I guess with the finance team. So in your point of view on building such a successful franchise here in Germany, what has been key for that initial traction on the sales side, but on the rest of the organization? What advice would you give sort of leadership around how to manage all of that fast growing and all of that kind of chaos that happens at the beginning?
All right. So I would say it's been a wild ride. Payhawk as a company, we haven't fully defined our magic formula, but we've got part of it right. And I would say it comes down to 3 components to watch out for, and some you can replicate, some you can't. It ultimately comes down to kind of your playbook in IT, in finance, and in commercial/sales. And these are, I would say, the 3 components you need to look out for. And especially when we look at IT, I think what's important that you have a very strong global backbone. If you consistently drive expansions as a growth company, you need to have what some call a single source of truth, a system of truth in place. So that's essentially unified systems across the entire company, because you can't build up entities in every country and kind of have them work autonomously as their own company. That's not going to work. We want to keep what has made us successful, but adjust what needs to be adjusted. But in order to move fast, we need that unified backbone. It comes down to systems in procurement, HR, partially customer success that deeply root in headquarters and that we can simply take and roll out everywhere, same process. What we focus on that really needs to be on point is 2 things, RevOps and finance. So RevOps, that's obviously our CRM, adjacent marketing AI tools. And then in finance, it's our accounts payable, expense management, yada, yada, yada. That all roots in headquarters, it runs globally the same way. And we take it, we give the ones the licenses, the cards, and so on, and it works just well. But at the same time, we gotta give, a lot of autonomy to our local people, and I'm obviously somebody that benefits from that, because I think we all know that you can't simply replicate a commercial playbook, right? So just because something works fantastically in the UK doesn't mean that it's just going to run as smoothly in Germany. Obviously, we're different people, and customers are different, and so on. But hands down, in the end, it comes down to regulations, for example. It's the nitty-gritty little things that matter here that don't allow us to replicate and just copy-paste things. We gotta do it full on, and regulations deeply affect how we run marketing, how partially we do sales, and obviously finance and tax is also something to watch out for. So we need this kind of autonomy, and we know exactly where we need it. And the third one kind of also goes back to AI, is that we need some kind of operational excellence. And a fun fact, we actually don't have a COO, but we try to operate as leanly as possible, so to speak, and actually leveraging AI to the full extent wherever it is feasible for us. So obviously, as you said, we're a commercial organization here in Germany with product and also finance in headquarters. So what we're doing here, we're trying to spread the word for Payhawk, help customers. So what we want to do is we want to create value with customers, spend a lot of time with them, instead of administering financial things, wasting time, doing admin work. We just want to work as lean as possible here. So we do use AI as much as we can, and obviously we also use Payhawk a bunch. We're among our top 10 customers, so we ourselves. So we use it to full extent to allow for the local operators to have as much time as they can possibly have.
Because the 3 have mentioned some sort of technological implication in the responses, right? You spoke about the NetSuite, and you spoke about also about how important tools are in place, and obviously, Felix, you mentioned as well. So definitely, it seems that to expand fast and efficiently, technology has to be in the mix, or there has to be some sort of technology that is typically probably centralized or somehow orchestrated, architected at headquarters, and that can easily be replicated into other systems, right? So, Felix, I'll be back to you because you've mentioned AI a couple of times, right? It seems today, and help us understand, because there are many kind of people around us that are just saying that AI is the next level of automation or the next level of kind of cost saving or automation of processes in the system. How are you in Payhawk thinking about it? Is it just about lean? Is it just about fast? Is it just about less resources? Or is there something else behind AI?
Yeah, it's funny that you actually bring it up. Just pops up in my mind. There's a big VC fund, an operating VC around the corner, where the GM said, "I think we shouldn't get all crazy about AI. We can simply bring automation to the next level and invest more into that." And I guess it's partially true. And I think it's true when you look upon AI as a generator of efficiency. And we all know that AI is great in creating efficiency, but something that we just recently learned, or just also I came to realize, that it does also a few other things. I don't want to be high level, I want to be very concrete. We had one customer, they mid-market company, hidden champ in manufacturing, no bit cliche for the German mid-market, but anyway, they had a lot of fragmented data when it comes to spend and procurement across, I think it was 6-7 entities, I'm not quite sure, but reasonably many to actually maintain it properly. And eventually they rolled out Payhawk, and they implemented it and they adopted it quite solidly. And actually, to our surprise, and actually I don't like surprises, but this was a good one, was that, because we can use it as a reference now, was that the German tax authorities actually approved essentially their audit right away. So they ran a tax audit, and when they submitted it, no follow-up questions. And we talked to the customer trying to understand why, and I said, well, it was traceable, it was clear, it was straightforward, and there wasn't any errors. So typically, if something is prone to error, you detect the errors, you come with questions because you come skeptical. And who has dealt with the German tax authorities knows that it can be a pain in the A dot. And looking at that, it just goes to show that this is not just an efficiency generator, but it actually is an enabler or trust automator, so to speak, and that just makes things a hell of a lot easier,
Good, great, amazing. So we've also heard, I think, on the panel, compliance and reporting, right? Probably those are the two top priorities, or things that the first thing that you want to make sure as a finance leader that you have under control once you move, right? So Alina, specifically focusing on these two things, what typically works well to make sure that those two are correctly? I know there's a lot of priorities, but if we focus specifically on those two, how do we make, when we grow, those two continue to be set at, right? Because you very rightly mentioned that typically you see, as a management team or as a leadership team, that you open a country and it takes like 5-6 months to actually get reporting from that customer and stuff. How do we bridge that gap and make sure that works well from the start?
Yeah. It's an interesting question, because also part of my career I spent in internal audit, so I really saw how it can work and it also cannot work. I think one best practice obviously is to make sure that you very early on align on a good consolidation tool to get the numbers in, make sure that your local ERPs kind of feed their numbers into your centralized tool, and then maybe you can think about rolling out a joint ERP if that is part of your strategy. Obviously, it's not part of the strategy of all the companies. So being central or decentral on that question is definitely a strategic leadership decision, I would say. And then on the governance side, making sure that these numbers are reported frequently, and also make sure that all the KPIs that you want to report or want your country leaders to report actually follow the same definition. Because in the end, if you have different definition of who is your customer or who is a churned or a new customer, then really, if you don't have that definition, then really you talk about apples and pears, right? And I think that happens very often if you don't sit down with your country leads or your country head of finances to define these KPIs and make sure that the definition is straightforward. Depending on the group and the local entities and what they're doing, obviously the KPIs might not also be the same, right? So there might be a company that operates in the same area, but they might have different business model or different customer payment methods or revenue streams. So it's important that on a group level, you kind of align to all of these, and then make sure that all the local entities kind of report the same way. And then, like looking back to my internal audit past, I would recommend to always do some checks in the local companies, and that might be just via kind of, maybe flying there and make sure that you have a good relationship with the head of finance, that you get the transparency that is needed, because otherwise that might also go wrong.
So it seems that sometimes we get frustrated as businesses if it takes 5 or 6 months, but probably the reason or the result of that is because the work was not done before. Like things were not properly planned, were not properly defined, and was not. So that is interesting, definitely. Jana, last bit, because I know we're running a bit late, but so going or moving from that more process framework, tangibly, how does all of this translate into real tools? Like we're talking about technology, so are there secret weapons that you, in your experience, have made all of this process easier? Weapons as processes, tools? Are there tools that you've implemented that has actually been very bad for this expansion? Walk us through your kind of experience of how really instrumenting tools or not instrumenting tools is helpful for achieving what we all want when we expand.
First of all, think about if you have enough time to implement those tools before you go abroad. Maybe to go one step deeper in compliance, if you have a B2C business, I would always think first in tax compliance. I'm now cleaning up 7 years of B2C business where manually the tax rates have been added at one step from one person in that specific tool, just because they didn't apply like an automatically updated taxonomy or tax tool. And tax rates change across the world, so it's fun. So I would then also like not just reporting and like local regulatory and of course headquarter regulatory reporting and consolidation is clearly one of the tools that you would think ahead. Also in terms of how do I need to report moving forward? Is it like moving from local GAAP towards IFRS, because then I have to like consolidate everything. So there's at least, I would say, 12 to 18 months time frame ahead of multi-entity level doing right, let's say, put it that way. Yeah. You can easily sail through if you only have one entity there and one entity there, and then it's not a lot of operations and not a lot of business there. But in B2B and B2C, it's also a bit different. So thinking about the tax tools, tax automation, and feeding in those revenues, so you are at least compliant and you have 1 foot into like continuous freedom as a CEO, so that's also something. And consolidation, reporting tools, and one thing that's always a little bit forgotten once you sail through the year is how would you design your budget and planning? So reporting is one thing, making sure everybody is aligned on KPIs or P&L design and how you would want to report the P&L. I think that's something that could like very well could easily be implemented as going straight forward into reporting. But then it's also like how would you be clear about how would you run your budgeting or budget process in the future? So you have all these entities across Europe or in the world. Do you want to, I don't know, do a bottom-up budget locally? Do you want to align that into your company? So like a planning and decentralized budgeting tool very early on clearly makes sense. You barely find a tool that is consolidation and does the planning very well. And it's very, I don't know, like rock stars in both of the things, because I would always look at the DNA of a tool. Where does the tool come from? So did you first start with credit card payments and spend management and then move ahead into other dimensions? Then you're probably very, very good at this specific credit card spend management. And the rest is evolving, yes. But did you start with consolidation first and then in a very dominant case, buy a planning tool and try to integrate that? Does that run smoothly, or do you want to focus more on a planning tool that has a DNA of planning and analytics first? So in choosing tools, and there's a lot of luckily after, I don't know, many years in this business, there's luckily a lot of choice and a lot of options in the market. Choose from tools. Always think of what is the DNA of the tool. And second, what is the integration doing? So can I apply this tool and 12 to 18 months moving forward, it still is applicable because I want to go in these countries, I want to go in these areas. And if I think of flexibly integrating them, I can still use the tool in like 1.5, 2 years moving forward. So at least in scale-up phases, moving very quickly. So I can't think of 5 years ahead, but I can at least think of 1.5, 2 years ahead. And the integration part or flexible adjustments, and also the innovation part of the tools is very important. So this is how I at least make a decision. What's the DNA? How would you want to be using it? Do you need it in 12 to 18 months? And then also, how innovative is so what's the product roadmap moving forward? And of course, then compliance, GDPR, those things, baseline. But yes, this is how I would go.
Amazing. So if we hear about it, it's about selecting probably when I expand into other jurisdictions. Most important is planning and consolidation. I think you're a bit skeptical of tools that try to do everything, so probably finding one tool that does one good thing or the other, or you still haven't probably found, but it's important to see what the DNA and especially what the future innovation or if those businesses continue to invest in improving the product, in doing better services, to make sure they kind of keep up with the curve, which if you continue to have a very steep growth curve is gonna be
absolutely
interesting. We had a couple more questions, but we know we are way out of time. So before we close it out, we're gonna open it to the audience in case you wanna take advantage of having Felix, Jana, and Alina here, and you wanna ask any questions before we wrap it up. I think everyone is extremely tempted with the open bar. We can do downstairs, right? Great. So I'll just very quickly close the panel. First of all, I want to thank you three. I think it's been very interesting. We first talked about sort of internationally from the sort of centralized finance standpoint. We also talked about it from the operators, and we all realized, I think, how important it is to plan ahead. We all realized how important it is to try to put the right guardrails and processes before expanding. Otherwise, it can get messy. And sometimes we blame sort of what is happening during the expansion, but what is to blame is what happened before the expansion. And then, obviously, all of you talked about technology, how technology really makes that expansion better if you choose the right tool and if you choose the right tools correctly, right? And finally, obviously, AI, which is part of the technology, but obviously new technology, new innovation that is making everything go faster. So thank you very much, the three of you. I'll let David close the session.